only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Caroline is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. This week is really the last week where I will be covering the Nazi, the National Socialism and all of that, which may come as a relief to some people who find it all a little bit much. I myself also find it a bit much, but for whatever reason, it's come full circle. I felt the need. I don't know why I need to research the Nazi stuff. I am in Germany. I have German blood. I'm married to a German. I spent 13 years here now. But, starting off at the cemetery and realizing, of course, that many people were killed during the war there as well, when a bomb was exploded while they were hiding at a wedding. And they were hiding in a basement there. And that was a terrible thing. And I think going on to the deportation camp where all the Jews were prepared before they were either sent to the other deportation camp, the exhibition center in Cologne, before being loaded on at the Deutz railway station to be sent to Treblinka or Auschwitz. And then this week, which again seemed to just naturally come, it was something that came to me. I looked on the internet to try to see what it was that I was feeling, and I found that I needed to go and see the what's called the ELDE House, or the National Socialist Documentation Center in Cologne. It's, as you will hear, because I've just come back from it, it's a museum now. And it was the former Gestapo, or the secret police during the Second World War, the former Gestapo headquarters. And really quite abominable things happened there. I think you'll get a sense of that when you hear me talking soon. So that's where we are this week. And at the end of these recordings, I want to then come back to you like this back in my studio where I feel quite safe. And I want to contact Titan, and I want to ask him some things that came up as you will hear, and what does it mean? And maybe give me a sense of where I fit into all of this history. But first I stopped off at a church right next door to St. Maria in der Kupfergasse, which is just off a street called Schwalbengasse. I thought I would quickly stand outside and have a quick look at this church. It was constructed actually quite late in the day compared to some of the places I've been. I think it was constructed in the 16th century. It was basically completely destroyed during the war, but I've come here because something made me want to come here. There's a brass sign as you come in, and it's talking about how it was first built in 1675. It mentions that in 1942, on the 31st of May, which is that famous night we've heard before of the 1,000 bombers, basically the whole thing was completely destroyed. And it's been rebuilt brick by brick, and for the few walls that were left standing between 1948 and 1952. So why did I feel I wanted to come here? Well, because I heard it's one of the few churches in the world, and certainly in Europe, that have a statue of the Black Madonna. And here she is, as you just walk in, turn right, and then you go into what looks like a small little chapel. And in front of this statue, which is about a meter tall, on a very quite elaborate wooden what do you call it? I suppose you call it a podium, but it's not quite a podium. It's not quite an altar either. There's sort of cherubs left and right, and cherubs on the wall, and some flowers in front. And the Black Madonna is holding a black child. Now, various stories are that it used to not be black, and the wood's got black over the years and everything else. But I can't help wondering just how more realistic this might have been to the biblical stories rather than the white Jesus Christ that we're used to seeing. But here we are anyway. I think I can actually go in. And she has some candles left and right as well. And she's very beautiful. And she's very revered in Cologne because she represents the beating heart of Catholicism here rather than the enormity and the grandioseness of the cathedral. She was also so revered that during the pandemic, I believe, 5,000 candles were lit in front of the Madonna to help promote healing and to give people help in the crisis that hit them. She's dressed up in sort of Arabic clothing almost. It's very elaborate gowns and very ornate in gold and beautiful. And she has a crown with many stars on her head. Again, it looks tremendously Middle Eastern. And yes, she's extremely old, and she's, as I said, one of the few Black Madonnas in the world, so definitely worth coming to see for that. These big green ornate steel gates are closed, so I can look in, but I can't go into the church proper. But it's a very tall but small chapel, really. It's got a lovely curved ceiling with a wooden altar, a very enormous wooden altar, and the wooden altar has carvings of various figures and looks to me like soldiers and probably religious figures as well. And yes, it's quite plain. It's there's no stained glass windows; they're just clear glass windows. I think I read somewhere that perhaps there used to be stained glass windows there. But yes, it's a very simple chapel. Well worth coming to see because it's one of the Romanesque churches in Cologne. But I really just came to see the Black Madonna, and I have no idea why, but I was drawn to come and see it. Really, I'm on my way out now, and what I really want to see is the former Gestapo headquarters here in Cologne, which is now a museum. And I promise to those listeners who perhaps have found the last couple of episodes a little disturbing, this will most definitely be my last visit to the Nazi past of Cologne. And I feel it was very fitting to end this little 3-episode take on the dead in Cologne by ending up at this place called the Documentation Center in Cologne. So I'll get on my bicycle and see you there. So here I am, and it's just probably about 30 meters from the church, and that could well be why I'm here. This is probably you could say a typical Nazi building. Those students of architecture will know what I mean. It's 4 stories above a ground floor. It's number 23 to 25 Appellhofplatz, and there's a big glass and metal door, and above the door it says ELDE. So I think that's how it's now named. It's the NS Doc, or the NS National Socialist Documentation Centrum der Stadt Köln. As I said, it's now a museum, but during the Second World War, where I'm about to go was the scene of some of the worst crimes that were seen in the city of Cologne. One can imagine here during the war the secret police, the Gestapo, working for the Nazi regime, would take people here and right past the church, right along this street, and they would be brought into this building for interrogation and torture. And towards the end of the war, I believe, a few hundred people were killed. It wasn't mainly about Jewish people, however. More than anything, it was about political people, or people who were considered to be against the regime, and for whatever reason, they needed to be interrogated and tortured. The building is quite deep. It goes back probably at least twice as long as it is in the front, along the side street, which is called Elisenstrasse. Each of the windows on the second and third floor have metal railings with green metal railings outside them. It looks very regimented, and as I said, students of architecture will know this is probably a very typical German Nazi style of architecture. It certainly looks like a fortress. On the right of the entrance is what's now the Kölnisches Stadtmuseum. It's a very old-looking building with kind of white and red wooden shutters. It looks very medieval. I'm not terribly sure what the history of this building is. I will look it up when I get back. But it's a beautiful old building. We're certainly in the heart of what old Cologne used to be. Okay, I'll now make myself known to the NS Documentations Centrum. I'm not sure how much recording I can do in there, but I'll do my best. And when you hear from me next, I'll be inside. Well, I came into the place. I got myself the ticket and followed the markings on the floor, which take me immediately to a staircase, which is going down to the basement. And I believe most of the shocking things happen down here. So now I find myself in a prison cell. This is a former Gestapo prison cell in the basement. And you can certainly see they wanted it downstairs. You get that feeling they didn't want anyone else to know what was going on down here. It was used between 1935 and 1945. And yes, it was an interrogation area. The inmates, it says here, were held as long as the Gestapo was interrogating them, and this could be for months, several weeks or months. It comprised down here of 10 cells, lavatories, as well as rooms for the Gestapo guards to live. So most of these cells are the original cells where people were kept. There's some pictures here of where we were last week, where the deportation lager was, but also talking about how the former huge camp where they kept people is now the great big exhibition center in Cologne, but it's got the same building that it had then. Well, roughly the same building in terms of a tower. Obviously, the rest of it was knocked down and a brand new exhibition center was built on top. But it's quite interesting how much history has just been erased again, and new buildings have been put on top of the old. But I have this strong feeling that here we are underground, and things are still here, just like the dead are buried, so are all the history. And on the wall, you can see people have scratched with a key or with something their names. The 6 Russians were kept here. Sarwin, Yagoda, in 1944, and they've scratched their names here on the wall, I suppose. I can't imagine why they'd want anyone to know they were here. Maybe it was frustration, maybe they just were taken and nobody knew where they were, and maybe somebody would identify that one day. I'm in another cell now. It's a very small cell. It must be about 2 meters wide and maybe 4 meters long, and maybe 3 meters high. There's a very tiny little room that just goes off it here. And somebody's put some flowers in there, but it looks really awful. I don't know what was going on in that little room. very, very small. I'm reading on the wall that it says protest and resistance. So I think, death to all fascists. So I presume, yes, people who were against the regime, and I suppose people forget that there were an awful lot of people who were against the regime. They suffered. They were brought here and tortured as they tried to round up any resistance to the regime. Another little cell next door. People who wrote on it, and they've actually put the number of days that they were there, and they've put the days of the week, Montag, Dienstag, and then they've January I can see, and they've typical like you see in those movies about prisons, they've crossed each week out, and they've made even little pictures of themselves. There's Escarolo Claudio 6/12/1944. So a lot of this on the wall, a lot of people putting their memories on the wall. These cells now are again about 3 or 4, or maybe 4 meters long, but only about 1 meter wide and about 4 meters high, 3 meters high. And all of them seem to have similar inscriptions where people have tried to keep track of the dates that they've been in here by marking little makeshift calendars on the wall. Yes, it's explaining about all these calendars and dates, and a lot of the people down here were communists, obviously a big enemy of the National Socialists. The people down here were accused of distributing political flyers and participated in actions that were considered to be against the Nazis. This lady, Muki, was here. She was arrested in 1942 and 1943, and each time imprisoned in this Gestapo prison for several days, subjected to brutal interrogations. She was eventually moved to Braunweiler camp, and she survived in the end due to the lack of evidence against her, and she still lives in Cologne. So that's a nice story that somebody survived this. Well, I've come through all the prison cells, and as I walk down the corridor and turn left, I'm suddenly greeted by sunlight and light, and after all the gloom of being stuck down here, it's quite nice to see. But sadly, it's not quite what it seems. I just reading on the wall that in this, what they call an Innenhof, or an inner courtyard in 1944 to 1945, more than 400 people, inmates, were executed here. So I'm going to go and walk into this corridor, which now I'm in the in this Hof. It's all very modern, really. There's even a garage here. It's been tarmacked, and the stone has been done. It's just like any other garage, but surrounded by the prison, and there seems to be some houses overlooking it, and some trees, and there's some mirror right. They put a mirror right there, I suppose, to make it all feel a little bit larger. But you stand here, and this is really why I came. I wanted to feel something. So give me a second, because I'm beginning to feel quite overcome by all of this. Well, I thought I could do this, but I'm not sure that I can. I'm going to leave soon, but I want to tell you what I feel. As I came into the courtyard, immediately the beautiful sun hit me, and it's warm and hot and it's beautiful. But I had that very strong feeling that that's all people saw. This was, for so many people, their last experience of life on Earth. And I have the feeling of people, taking that in. And I have those messages being sent to me by people of, this is lovely to get out of this prison. It was lovely to get out of the dark and being tortured. But equally very scary to know that this is the last moment on Earth for so many people. Now, they've built all these mirrors. It was an artwork that was done, I think. And you look at yourself, and that's even more scary, because whichever way I look, I'm looking at myself, and the mirrors have been done in a certain way that they reflect at angles on you. So whichever way you look, you're looking at yourself. It's almost like a reflection, as like, to deliberately say to you and to German citizens, look at yourself, look what you did, in plain sight, right in the center of town, with people could oversee you. This wasn't underground. This was in an open area where people could know there were executions going on, and nothing much was done about it. Nobody dared, maybe, but it's truly sad. I suppose it's one of those times that it can happen to someone who's channeling things. I've never quite felt this before. I have this sense of being asked to stay here. There's that feeling that they want me to be here. They want me as if I'm some company to them. But equally, I feel so terrified, and I feel that fear, and I want to run from here. I want to leave. I don't feel comfortable here at all. Yes, it's a very banal-looking space now compared to what it must have been before. Whether people were shot or hung, I have no idea. But for all the reasons that the energy of all of this stuff, all these crimes, is left behind, and I feel that energy. It's very overwhelming for me. I really must leave this courtyard now. Well, sitting outside now on a bench, I looked around the whole museum, and it's basically 2 floors of pictures and objects, and all about the National Socialist ideal as it was. How it infiltrated the whole society from the children upwards, and all societies were all harmonized into the Nazi ideology. And there are a lot of memorials there, and a lot of sad pictures of people who were killed over the time that they were in Germany, pictures of the camps. But what came across very, very closely to me when I was there, and this has sort of worried me a bit, and I think maybe explaining why I felt so uncomfortable. I just had this incredible feeling that I knew this building and that I had been in this building before. And I think that's where it all comes from. And I can only tell you how I feel. I don't think I was an inmate here at all. I think I actually was a soldier. And I actually worked in this building. I believe I was part of this organization, and I felt like I knew this building, and I knew as I was walking around the rooms, it felt familiar to me. I went down to a second basement, and it's not much compared to the first basement with all the cells, but it was probably the worst place of all, because right down there was a little room where people were tortured and murdered, I think murdered, and I could get a tremendous sense from the smell. That smell was so familiar to me. It was like it just brought back so many memories. You could say it's the smell of many damp cellars, but this was a smell I can't forget. I know this smell, and it had that effect on me. Well, that's basically how I left it at the documentation center, and I got on my bike and I came back to my studio. I feel safer here. It was a really terrifying experience for me, and something happened there. And it's something that I didn't expect, which was a connection that I suddenly felt. But it was a connection not only to that building and those things that had happened in that building, but a connection, if you like, that in a way tied together not only the Melton graveyard, but also the deportation center from the episode before. And I'm not really sure exactly what's going on. So I really, unusually, I wanted to come back and I want to contact Titan to see if I can't get some answers. So I did my normal protection rituals. I didn't do anything of the sort when I was in either the church or the documentation center. I didn't really feel the need. I wasn't so much channeling spirits. It was, again, very much like in the other 2 places. It was more about feeling the energy and trying to understand what those energies were that I was feeling and trying to convey to you, which I think was what was important. But now it's my turn, and I really want to talk to Titan and ask him if he can try and pull together these experiences I've had and why I've had these experiences and why I have been drawn to them. Okay, so Titan is most definitely here now, and I must say, Titan, I'm feeling a little bit small, a little bit nervous as to quite what to make of this experience. I've never quite felt what I felt in that courtyard or in that place. Can you please try to convey to me why I was feeling that way? Okay, Titan says that I wasn't aware, but there are past lives that I've had that involve this place. I wasn't an inmate, and I wasn't a soldier, okay? I was a very senior official in the hierarchy of the party, the Nazi party, during the Second World War. And what I felt when I was walking around the documentation center was not that I had worked there. It was because I was inspecting it. It was a place that I had come to look at. It was my job. She's saying that's why I had that feeling that I worked there, or it was my job, but it wasn't your job. You were a senior official, and it was your job to get involved in the administration of that building and many other things in Cologne during the Second World War. How does this tie then with everything else that I've been feeling? She says that you have a tremendous sense of guilt. And this guilt is something that you felt even in the time that you were a senior official. You were responsible for a lot of terrible things that you now can feel that guilt from, because it is still part of your soul. It was part of your life. And she's saying this is where the church comes in. That church was a church that you quite often went into as an official, and you were a Catholic believer, and that wasn't unusual. And you would quite often confess in that church the terrible things that you had witnessed, the terrible things that you were involved in, because you weren't always a senior official in this party. You were, in fact, originally a chemist. And as a chemist, you had joined the party as a young man and had progressed very rapidly through the party structure, because you were actually quite a fanatic in your beliefs about National Socialism. She's saying this ties in not only to the deportation camp, because you obviously went and inspected that, and that was part of your responsibility, but also you were responsible for the record keeping and the proper documentation of what was going on with all the various people who were being interrogated and deported in this particular region that you were living in. Okay, well, I feel pretty awful about it, because it's not very nice to find out, all these years later that you had another life doing something like that. I suppose naively all my life I thought if I did have another life, I would have been something extremely saintly. Titan is saying, honestly, it's not something that you can spend this life worrying about. There were so many people who've had previous lives similar to that, and it's nothing that you should now feel guilty for. But she says it's quite interesting that guilt from a previous life can often spill over into your current life, and it can actually affect the way that you lead your current life. But not only just because of the memory that is there, even though you find it hard to access it because it was a previous life, it's also because of part of what she says, what we've discussed before, where your lives, your previous lives, have to be examined, and things that you did need to be put into the proper context of what you were there to learn. And obviously I've gone through that process already with my previous life, and chose the life that I'm living now. But she says, let's be correct here. Yes, the life that you're living now, but you're only saying that because it seems concurrent, that you had a life in the Second World War and then you were born in 1960 and you've got your current life. She said it's not like that, because again, you mustn't get confused with the non-existence of time. Time only exists to us, and we see it as a progression through time. But you've had many previous lives, and you are having many other lives simultaneously to the life you're leading now. She says she's tried to explain that concept before, and Neil has also got involved in trying to explain that concept before. But it's very important that you understand that, because then you can probably understand, if you have many concurrent lives, you can't possibly feel guilty for something that you haven't done in your time. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, because in your time, you haven't done it yet. Historically, you may have, but that's not the way that lives work. Well, I'm really going to have to get my head around that. But thank you for helping me with that, because I was trying to understand why these places seemed suddenly so familiar, and what I was doing there, and why I felt the need for these last sort of 3 episodes to get into that blood beneath my feet. And she's saying to me, yes, because you were intimately involved in that during the war, and ultimately, at the end of the war, she's telling me that I was executed for being a war criminal. Okay. Again, I'm not terribly sure I wanted to know that, and I don't kind of know what sort of war criminal I was or what I did. I'm not terribly sure I want to know more than that. But Titan is saying again, try not to feel too close to that. That was a previous life. There have been many people who are living right now in your time, who have done extraordinarily awful things in history, as you might see them. But they're living normal lives because that was a previous life, and they've examined that life, and they've learned from that life, and they've atoned for that life, all the things that we've discussed before. And she's actually saying, please don't go down those dark stairs, like I went to in this documentation center. Don't disappear down that hole, because you cannot be held responsible for what you did then in your life now. Okay. But she says if there's any consolation to this, it's that the things that you did in the name of obedience, and as you were told to do. You were very passionate about your beliefs, but you had tremendous guilt and a feeling of responsibility because you were a Christian, and you didn't really want to do what you were doing, but you did it anyway. And that is where that church comes in, because you quite often would sit there opposite that black Madonna, and you would pray for forgiveness, and you would pray for help to get you to understand what you were doing, and to try to make the unforgivable somehow be forgiven. And that's why you felt drawn to that church, because it was a very familiar place for you. And your offices were located not in the documentation center, but very close by in a building which is very close to that. Okay, well, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to find that now, Titan, because everything there now is pretty much new, and most of it was totally destroyed during the war. It's very hard to find out quite where things were, but I'll accept that as bad as I might have been in a previous life, there was goodness in me, and that goodness was something that was very hard for me to express. She's saying to me that final part when I was in the documentation center and I was standing in the courtyard where the 400 or so people had been executed. She's saying that sense that feeling that I had been overcome, that came because of that guilt that you have. It wasn't so much just about the energy that you were feeling, although that is true, but you felt tremendous guilt because of a lot of the work that you were doing had actually caused these people to end up in that courtyard and to end up, being executed. And that must be, something that is tremendously difficult for a soul to cope with. And she's saying you went through a very long, lengthy process in order to be able to get over that situation and to move on and to understand what you should be doing in your next life. But Titan, what comes to my mind is the amount of evil that perhaps I was responsible for, and many people who are living have had that responsibility for evil in previous lives. It is quite hard for us to live a life if you know that. And she's saying to me that everyone knows it. Everyone can get in touch with their past lives. It's no great big secret. It's a question of concentration and practice. She's saying that you can easily do it because that's something you've done all your life. You can contact your previous lives. You can contact concurrent lives, mainly through your dreams. But you're always getting messages backwards and forwards. Everybody's influences come from that. Their hobbies, their feelings, their emotions, their recognition of things, coincidences. These are all coming because they are none of those things. They're not coincidences. They're all things that are happening simultaneously in lives that seem as real as the life that you think is the real life you're leading. Okay, well, I think it's about time I laid, after 80 years, the World War III it was a slip of the tongue, World War II to bed. And it's quite ironic, again, near the town where I live, another bomb was found, and this time it was found in an abandoned graveyard. Well, it's not an abandoned graveyard, it is still used as a graveyard, but it was found in an abandoned part where they were probably digging holes for new graves. Very ironic, I thought. And it was another massive Second World War American flying an air bomb. It was like all these bombs diffused pretty easily. But yeah, just to finish it this week, thank you, Titan. It's left a very lasting impression on me. I've lived in this town for a long time now and never felt so close to it as I do now, because I understand some of the history and probably understand my part in that history. And I can look at this town now in a completely different light. I can understand my role in it. And the history, in a way, suddenly is not very far away. That's an amazing feeling. It's almost like it happened yesterday now. Bringing those memories back of previous lives and all the people that I've been in contact in the last three weeks has made it so much more real. And has flooded my senses with these people, and has enabled me, I think, to have such an appreciation, and it gave those people a voice as well. And I am truly sorry if that's necessary for anything that I did to make people's suffering worse, to have been part of probably one of the darkest periods in world history. But I'm not alone. and if we all could look into our past lives, we might be pleasantly surprised, or we might be deeply shocked about the things that we got involved in. But that is the nature of life and existence. We can't all have been Jesus or an angel. We also had that side of us where we did some truly awful things. But the point of life was to recognize that, even if you didn't in your life, after life, in the processes thereafter, and try to atone for it. Atonement, this sense of make it better, learn from it, and help those in the future, in the lives that are yet to come, to make the world a better place, to get involved in the helping of people right now to make the world a better place. Well, next week will be the start of something slightly different. I was very drawn a few months ago to the ancient side of things, but I wanted to look into things that are way, way more ancient than I've ever looked at before. Obviously, it's possible for me to channel impressions going back to the 14th century. I've done that already. But what if I wanted to try to channel things going back thousands of years? I have in the past managed to contact an entity that was this hybrid machine-human that was, I think, 3,000 years in the future. Well, what if I tried to do it going backwards? And I thought, well, how am I going to do that? Well, again, being in Cologne, I'm lucky enough to have one of the best museums in Cologne. It's the Germano-Roman Museum. It's very close to the cathedral. And it's one of the best preserved Roman ruins in the world. It's, I believe, it's they preserved the forum that was there, and they've got a huge collection of Roman artifacts. I think even a Roman temple there, which is obviously underground now. And I want to understand, why are Roman ruins so far underground? Somebody once told me it's because over the thousands of years you just keep building on top, and eventually ground level becomes higher. I hope to learn more about that next week. So thank you again very much for listening. I know it's not been easy. It's certainly not been easy for me, but it's been very important, I think, to do that. And next week, I hope to find our Roman cousins and all the things that were happening. Now, there have been a couple of coincidences already that have led me to this. I have zero real interest in watching these sword and sandal epics. I mean, I'm sure when I was young, my father would probably sit me down and make me watch things like Ben-Hur. But completely out of the blue, I was drawn, for some reason, to a documentary about Elizabeth Taylor. And in that documentary, it talked about one of her most famous roles, and that was as Cleopatra in the film Cleopatra with her then husband, Richard Burton. And on a train journey to Berlin yesterday, the day before, I watched the whole film, 3 hours of it, and was really, really intrigued at the Roman times and the way they lived. And it really kind of sets the scene nicely, I think, for next week, where I hope to get really into the Roman Empire that was so big here in Cologne. Cologne was the heart of the Roman Empire next to Rome thousands of years ago. Thank you very much.